Jim Parsons was on top of the world at the height of the Big Bang Theory. His portrayal of Sheldon Cooper wasn't just a character, it was a phenomenon. Sheldon's quirks, obsessive routines, and razor-sharp intelligence helped the show pull in over 18 million viewers per episode, making it one of the most-watched sitcoms in television history. Jim wasn't just a star, he was the star. Forbes even called him the highest-paid television actor in the world, earning $1 million for every episode filmed. But fame and money weren't enough to hold him in place. In 2018, Jim was presented with what seemed like a dream scenario, a $50 million contract to continue playing Sheldon for additional seasons. Most actors would have jumped at the opportunity, but Jim said no. And the reason? It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a fight with the producers, and it wasn't creative burnout. It was something far darker, far more personal. Summer 2018, a season that should have been routine, turned into a period Jim described as almost cosmic. Between the end of Season 11 and the filming of Season 12, multiple life events collided in a way that shook him to his core. Everything from personal loss to physical injury happened simultaneously, leaving him questioning the very direction of his life. The first blow was heartbreak. Jim had 2 dogs with his husband, Todd Spewak. These weren't just pets, they were family. One of them, a 14-year-old companion, was nearing the end of its life. At the same time, Jim was performing 8 Broadway shows per week in The Boys and the Band revival in New York City. On top of that, he had taught Ravel back to Los Angeles for filming. The schedule was brutal, and his dog Shelf was deteriorating fast. Parsons remembers one walk in the park before a commercial shoot. The dog looked terrible. Jim was emotionally exhausted, barely holding it together. Todd reminded him they had commitments. Everyone's schedules revolved around him, and Jim just broke down. He was mourning the life they had shared together for 14 years. Yet, there was no pause, no time to grieve properly. The next day, they made the heartbreaking decision to euthanize their beloved pet at home. But life had no time for pause, and grief wasn't finished with him yet. Only days after this emotional devastation, Jim returned to the Broadway stage. But fate had more challenges in store. During a performance, he fractured his foot badly. An injury that could have ended a career built on precision, timing, and physical mobility. Yet, despite the pain, he powered through every performance. Afterward, in the hospital, reality hit hard. The human body is fragile. Jim realized. Breaks happen without warning, injuries happen without logic. And here he was nursing a potential career-ending injury in the middle of one of the busiest periods of his life. This wasn't just about physical strain. It was about the fragility of life itself. Jim was 45 years old at the time and had begun thinking about mortality. His father had died at 52 and Jim was now staring down the years doing the math. If he continued on the same path, by the end of a hypothetical season 14, he'd be 47, only 5 years away from the age his father never reached. Parsons isn't superstitious, he clarified on a podcast, but he referred to it as context. In other words, mortality, the clock, the inevitable finish line that everyone fears but rarely talks about. Would he really want to spend those remaining years on a sound stage wearing the same superhero t-shirts, acting out the same scripted lines day after day? This question haunted him. The answer began to become clear. No. Meanwhile, Todd was encouraging him to focus on new creative projects. They had founded That's Wonderful Productions in 2015, a company with potential to produce original content. But Jim was trapped in a whirlwind of commitments, filming 8 episodes of The Big Bang Theory, performing on Broadway, working in Netflix's Hollywood, and fulfilling a commercial contract with Intel. His body and mind were screaming for rest. And the truth hit him like a ton of bricks that he couldn't give any more of himself to Sheldon Cooper. By August 2018, after that brutal summer, Jim returned to Los Angeles carrying a weight he couldn't shake. He knew what he had to do. One Sunday, he went to Chuck Lorre's house, the co-creator of The Big Bang Theory, and told him he wouldn't sign for seasons 13 and 14. Chuck understood immediately. He was supportive, compassionate, but realistic. Without Sheldon Cooper, there was no how. The title itself referenced Sheldon's work in theoretical physics. No Sheldon, no Big Bang Theory. Chuck didn't throw money at him. He didn't argue. He simply accepted it. Soon after, Jim gathered the cast, Johnny Galecki, Kay Cuoco, Simon Helberg, Kunal Mayer, Mayim Bialik, and Melissa Rauch in his dressing room. He told them the same thing he had told Chuck. Tears were shed. Johnny Galecki later admitted feeling blindsided, not by Jim's choice, but because Jim had gone to the creators first, not the cast. Yet over time, the cast realized that Jim might have been the only one brave enough to speak this truth aloud. CBS and Warner Brothers announced on August 22, 2018 that season 12 would be the show's last. Ratings were still massive. The writers weren't burned out, the decision wasn't financial. It was one man's choice to prioritize life over career. And this wasn't about a single moment. It was a combination of grief, fear of mortality, and the realization that he was living at an unsustainable pace. The sitcom had been a part of the cast's lives for over a decade. Leaving was a wrenching, but ultimately necessary decision. Soon after the announcement, the media ran wild. Reports claimed Jim had turned down a $50 million offer for 2 more seasons. It made headlines worldwide. But Jim later clarified that no such contract existed. CBS had only been in preliminary negotiations and no formal offers had been made. In reality, by the time Jim made his decision, contracts weren't even on the table. The reports, however, became the accepted narrative. People asked, why would he walk away? What could be more important than fame, money, and legacy? For Jim, the answer was life itself. He had spent years on a grueling schedule, sacrificing personal happiness and health. He didn't need top row of anything to Hollywood. His decision wasn't rash. It was deeply calculated, almost spiritual. Sheldon Cooper's story was complete. By the end of season 12, Sheldon had achieved everything fans could hope for. He won the Nobel Prize, married Amy Farrah Fowler, and softened into someone capable of genuine friendship and love. His journey was done. Jim compared it to finishing a great novel. You don't add extra chapters just because the book is loved. You let it end. Before Jim was a household name, he was a theater kid from Texas. Born March 24, 1973 in Houston, he grew up in the suburb of Spring. His mother was a teacher and his father ran a plumbing supply company. From the age of 6, Jim knew he wanted to act. He performed in a school play, The Elephant's Child, playing the Coca-Cola bird. Something clicked. Unlike most 6-year-olds, Jim had absolute certainty that acting was his calling. But fear crept in. After high school, acting seemed risky. He enrolled at the University of Houston, initially avoiding theater. 2 years of misery later, he realized he couldn't ignore his passion. He switched majors, dove into theater, and never looked back. During college, he appeared in 17 plays over 3 years, and co-founded Infernal Bridegroom Productions, a company that staged dozens of productions before closing in 2007. He became a regular at the Staged Repertory Theater in Houston, honing his craft with intensity. After graduation, Jim sought further training. He got into a highly competitive Master of Fine Arts program at the University of San Diego in partnership with the Old Globe Theater. Only 7 students were accepted and even the director had reservations. Could Parsons' unique personality fit classical theater? Turns out it did. By 2001, he moved to New York City, ready to chase his dreams, but New York was harsh. Auditions were brutal. Rejections were constant. He survived on minor theater roles and commercials. His first TV role came in 2002 on Ed. Small film roles followed Garden State in 2004, and he appeared on Judging Amy. These were survival gigs, not stardom. In 2006, after years of struggling in New York, Jim Parsons got his first real shot at stardom. He auditioned for a new CB sitcom called The Big Bang Theory. When he read the pilot script, something unusual happened. He didn't connect with Sheldon Cooper as a person. Jim has admitted that he felt no personal bond with the character. What drew him in was the dialogue, the rhythm, the precise timing. Jim's audition was meticulous, almost surgical. Every line, pause, and reaction was perfectly calibrated. Chuck Lorre, the co-creator, was impressed, but also skeptical. Could Jim replicate this magic? Lorre called him back for a second audition, and Parsons delivered the same flawless performance again. It wasn't a fluke. It was genius and precision. He got the part. In A. Sheldon Cooper, Jim would redefine sitcom comedy for an entire generation. At first, critics were unsure. The show about socially awkward physicists didn't seem like a guaranteed hit, but audiences responded immediately. By season 3, the series became CBS's highest-rated show, pulling in over 12 million viewers per episode. Suddenly, Jim Parsons went from an almost unknown theater actor to a star recognized around the world. His ability to combine precision comedic timing with subtle emotional depth turned Sheldon from a on-note nerd into a beloved, complex character. Success came quickly, and so did the accolades. Jim Parsons won 4 Primetime Emmy Awards for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series in 2010, 2011, 2013, and 2014. In 2011. He also received a Golden Globe Award, cementing his place in television history. As the series' popularity soared, so did his pay. By 2010, Jim along with co-stars Johnny Galecki and Kay Cuoco was making $200,000 per episode. By 2014, that number skyrocketed to $1 million per episode, plus a percentage of the show's earnings. From 2015 to 2018, Forbes repeatedly named him the world's highest-paid television actor, earning $27.5 million in 2017 alone. Yet, even as the money, fame, and awards piled up, the life of a superstar took a toll. Jim never stopped doing theater. In 2011, he made his Broadway debut in Larry Kramer's The Normal Heart, a deeply personal project exploring the AIDS crisis. In 2012, he played in the revival of Harvey. And in 2015, Hestered as God in An Act of God, balancing Broadway performances with filming 8 episodes of The Big Bang Theory every few weeks wasn't just exhausting, it was unsustainable. Jim was traveling coast to coast, memorizing scripts and inhabiting vastly different characters. And all the while his mind and body were screaming for a break. By 2018, the pressure became unbearable. Jim was performing in the 50th anniversary Broadway production of The Boys and the Band, which later won the Tony Award for Best Revival of a Play. Simultaneously, he was filming The Big Bang Theory, working on Netflix limited series Hollywood, and maintaining his commercial contract with Intel. It was during this period that life hit him from every angle. The grief over losing his dog, the physical strain from fracturing his foot, and the emotional weight of aging and mortality all converged. Parsons began questioning what it meant to dedicate another 2 seasons to a role he had already mastered. A role that demanded the same intense energy every single week. And then came the numbers. Rumors of a $50 million contract for 2 more seasons began circulating. The media framed it as the ultimate temptation. Money, fame, and power in one package. But Jim wasn't driven by money. By this point, he had already achieved more than most actors could dream of. What he wanted was control over his life, his health, and his creative choices. In August 2018, Jim finally acted on the clarity that had been building for months. He visited Chuck Lorre not to negotiate, not top lead, but to deliver a choice. He would not sign for seasons 13 and 14. Chuck didn't argue. He didn't beg. Understood that without Sheldon Cooper there was no show. The decision wasn't about ratings or money. It was about the human limits of one actor. Jim had carried the series for over a decade. He had brought Sheldon to life, defined the show's tone, and carried it on his shoulders. The time to step away had arrived. Jim then gathered the cast, his television family, for the hardest conversation of his life. Johnny Galecki, Kay Cuoco, Simon Helberg, Kunal Nair, Mayim Bialik, and Melissa Rauch Lissanitas. He shared the decision. Tears flowed freely. While some were initially blindsided, they eventually recognized that Jim was being honest, brave, and self-aware, and the world watched as the Big Bang Theory prepared to conclude.